and this is entirely, I believe in my whole heart, attributable to the work that we did before the pandemic started coming and hitting us so hard. We were able to maintain 100%, with the exception of normal turns. We maintained 100% occupancy during COVID. Um, we were able to maintain 100% collections. Now, we had about 3 people that got in the habit of paying late. So instead of paying by the 5th or 10th of the month, they would drag it out to the 20th or 25th. But by the end of the month, they were good.
As an operator, I know other investors are romanticizing multifamily investing, and I'm looking to learn from other investors' mistakes. I know you are too, and you found the right place. Welcome to Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Multifamily Missteps. I'm your host, Jerome, and I've got William Edwards in from Charlotte today. Brother, you're down the road from me. How are you?
Just a hop, skip, and a jump, man.
Look, I met Mr. Edwards here at MFIN, and I was like, after hearing about his experience, I was like, man, we need to get on the line. I know you got some more stories for me, but for the listeners, they may not have heard of you. They may not know what you've been up to. So what have you been working on over the past couple of years so that they can get up to speed on who you are and what you're about?
Yeah, so in short, kind of my testimony is I had a business. We sold software systems, ERP and CRM software systems. For 24 years, I had a business partner. We sold that in 2015. And then around 2018, and by the way, I'll back up. And then so I started doing W-2 work and 1099 work as a project manager in that same space for some friendly competitors and for some industry. Around 2018, during that 2008, 2009 era, right, I had some, I won't call them senior friends, more mature friends that has lived through that period of time and had shared that they had lost a lot of money in that crash and didn't know if they're going to make it back or if they would live long enough to see it come back. So after selling my business, I started trying to figure out, like, I'm old enough now. I'm in my later 50s, by the way. I can see enough of the runway with my headlights. What's the situation going to be like when I get to retirement, or can I get to retirement? Will I be able to afford to retire? Or are we going to hit? Seems like about every 10 years something happens. Like, I'm old enough to remember like that Black Friday Monday thing in 80s and 90s, and then Y2K came around, and then the 2008 deal, and then now we're in COVID. Nobody could have predicted any of those. Or they might claim they can, but they can't. So, who knew, right? So I needed to start moving things in a direction that was more stable, preferably tax advantaged. Get out of the equity world because of the volatility as much as anything else, right? Am I going to retire and then the market's going to tank, or is it going to tank as I get to retire and I can't? And what's my lifestyle going to be like after that? So I started looking at other options, and I settled in on real estate. My wife said she lost me for 6 months, but I immersed myself in education and learning and podcasts and books and all that. And real estate checked all my boxes, right? But within real estate, there's a lot of different asset classes. So, I looked at retail, looked at single family, office, triple net leases. I thought about that for a short period of time. But the one that checked the most boxes for me was multifamily. Single family was intriguing, but I figured out pretty quickly that to scale and get to where I wanted to be, that was going to be buying myself another job, and I wasn't ready for that. So multifamily was attractive, and I started doing LP investments as a limited partner. So I'm not buying and controlling those deals. In 2018, and today I'm in about 5,000 units as a limited partner with other people and other syndicators. And then I just sold a 37 unit deal in September, and which we're going to talk about today. And I'm in 100 aggregate 2 other deals for a total of 154 units.
Beautiful.
As a GP and a KP.
As a GP and a KP, that's a general partner and a key principal for those of you who are new to this thing. So,
and by the way, I'll just interject this. The day I closed on my sale of that 37 unit that we're going to talk about today was also my last day in the W-2 space.
Love it. Totally out. Freedom, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we call that. That is exiting the matrix. So I like the 37 unit. A lot of people think they need to go buy 1,000 unit portfolio the first year. and then they realize how hard that truly is. And so some acquiesce and they just say, oh, I'm just going to be an LP and I'm done. I understand doing that if you've got retirement dollars, but if you've got non qualified money, you probably want to put that to work in your own deal. And it sounds like you got to the place where you were LP, LP, LP. Now I'm going to do my own deal. And so instead
Right.
of going to get a 100 unit plus, you go do a 37 unit.
And I've had people, ask me since then, why didn't you partner with people? I did that deal basically my own personal portfolio. My wife and I pooled our money and did the best that we could do, right? And I've had people ask, why didn't you partner with other people and go to take down a much bigger deal? And I would have liked to, but the honest answer is I didn't know people at that point. I'm not as educated and I'm not as networked as I am today. And you do you do the best you can do with what you got. And we figured out what we could make available to put in this kind of investment, and we did what we could do. And it happened to be the 37, which was actually bigger than what I was looking. I was looking for something around 20, but you know, you you evaluate what comes across your desk, and that came across my desk, and we were able to make it work, and ended up taking it down and running it full cycle.
So why were you looking for a 20? How'd you pick this number? Because, the holy grail is 100 units. Why would you do anything smaller than that? I know you said you did it by yourself. I know people said, why didn't you partner? But you picked this. I mean, this was intentional choice by you.
Yeah, and so to kind of qualify or clarify, my LP investments are predominantly through a solo 401k, right? So I made the decision I was going to migrate some of my investment IRAs and 401ks and consolidate those into a solo 401k. Some restrictions on that are you can't invest in your own deals, right? You can't have controlling interest in your own deal. You can't self-service, right? So this ideal is perfect for LP investments, but for personal portfolio investments, that's as much as I could do, right? So we looked at what we had in brokerage accounts, savings accounts. What were we comfortable taking off the table, right, to do this investment? And I was looking at 20 because I thought that's all the best I could do. This 37 unit came around, and we found as part of the underwriting for that some operational efficiencies like we felt could make it happen. So it was a stretch. It was a stretch by. It was above where we were looking, but it worked out. Ultimately, it worked out. And it worked out fantastically, as a matter of fact.
Love it. And the beautiful part of it is you operated your first deal with your own money. So if it did not work, you only had to look at
Yeah,
yourself. You didn't have to look at a bunch of people or be awkward around the Thanksgiving dinner table because, you know,
that's
Uncle
awkward.
Bob wants to know where he's going to get his money back. Okay. So you do this deal and it goes perfectly, right? I mean, there's no challenges whatsoever other than it was a bigger stretch than what you planned on doing initially.
No, there was a stretch. So we had some challenges, and they came up pretty early. So I've read and I watched podcasts and all that, but when we got to the point of doing due diligence on the property, this property was a townhome format. It's 37 townhomes across 5 buildings, and it was 2012 vintage, so not terribly old. And I was buying it in early 2019. So we went on site to do our due diligence. I took some people with me, and we sampled units. We didn't walk every single unit, right? And so we sampled 1 or 2 units in each building, and we did not pay attention. We didn't do a deep dive on the HVAC systems. It's 2012. They're only 7 years old. How bad can it be? Um, and so once we got control of the property, we closed on it. We started having a run of HVAC issues, right? And several of which early on required replacement. Over the first 6 months or so, we probably replaced about 8 HVAC units. And what I think had happened in retrospect is that the previous property management group slash ownership group, um, they're probably giving the maintenance guys a directive to just keep things moving, keep things working, right? We're not going to invest in replacing units and things. So some things we discovered were, like, it was a townhome format. There's an upstairs and downstairs zone, and so a zone board would go out, and they would just hot wire the other zone to the one thermostat. Um, Doing stuff like that. They have leaks, they just keep pumping freon in it. They weren't fixing anything, right? They were just keeping it moving, keeping things going. And they could have been doing that in part because they knew they're going to relinquish the property. But I didn't discover it, and that's on me, right? I should have known better, and it won't happen again.
So, do you think if you went through every unit that this would have become evident, or the way that it was done, unless you did destructive testing, like you couldn't have found this because that's a
Well,
big deal.
some of the, to your point, some things we would not have discovered, but we'd have seen some patterns in how some of those units were set up. We would have discovered the situation. What I should have done, or what I wish I had done, was hire, because at 37 units, we can't justify on-premise property management. You can't afford to hire an on-site maintenance team either, right? So it was going to be off-site managed. We were going to be using contractors and vendors for all this. What I in retrospect wish I had done was go ahead and contract and bring on, at least for a day or two, an HVAC contracting company and have them come in and go through the units as well. We would have seen some things like the zone board situations. They should have been able to find those. That would have been a red flag, right? We should have seen things like where there was some this piece or part of the unit was replaced, this one wasn't. They should have both been replaced at the same time. Why weren't they? It would raise some red flags and cause us to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. Okay, and it's interesting that you said you can't tell whether it was they knew that they were getting ready to get out, so just band-aid it versus actually fixing it, or we're well, I think we might be able to figure that out. When you bought the property, were they charging market rent? Did the expense ratios look appropriate? Like, was there anything in the financials that may have signaled that they were in trouble?
So we reviewed the work order logs, right? In the past work orders, we did do that, and we didn't see those types of patterns, or didn't know enough to get clued in. That's what might have been going on, right? But we also had a companion problem. I call it a problem, on the tenant base side, right? So, and again, this is the second thing we could have done a better job of. We were reviewing the leasing files, right? Not everybody was meeting the 2.5 to 3x income ratio, right? They were doing things like no security deposits or $99 security deposits. And in conversations with the property management team, their perspective, and this is my first buy, was, well, that's what the market is around here right now, right? The market, we can't sustain doing a full month's rent as a security deposit. We can't, if we want to we can't enforce a 3x income, to rent ratio. So between you and me, my suspicion is they were stuffing the units to keep them occupied, keep the occupancy up, which had a downstream effect of, once we got control over it, we had to work through some tenant replacement issues, right? So it took us a while, 8, 9, 10 months to let some of those go away and release them and get a better, higher quality of tenant base. And a lot of those nagging issues went away.
Really? Imagine that.
Yeah. Yeah. It does make a difference.
So did you replace the property manager, or did you keep the folks that were there on staff?
I was fearful that I was not going to be able to keep the existing property manager, because they talked a really good story and they had a good reputation. I don't say they had a good reputation. I don't know what the reputation was at that point, but they had a number of properties under management, and many of those were nearby the property I was buying. So I couldn't. There was a companion, a sister property around the corner, and they were managing this property out of that leasing office. Again, 37 units, you can't justify doing that. One of the things we saw in underwriting the deal was these expenses they seemed too high. They seemed that they're too high. And what we kind of figured out was they were allocating an expense based on a ratio from the other property into this property and inflating how much expenses were. So we figured out we could adjust that and manage it better. And I was fearful I wasn't going to be able to keep them all. Man, they know the tenants, they know the property, they know the other properties around here, they know the market. And I just could not work out a deal. I just could not work it, and which was good, it turns out. I just couldn't make the numbers work, keeping them on board. So I ended up going to another property management company that purely works off-site. Now the models are different. So for on-site property management, it's common to pay a smaller percentage. I'm just going to throw some numbers out there: 3% as a property management fee, and then you have the overhead and labor burden for the staff, whether it's a leasing agent, a regional manager percentage, a maintenance supervisor, maintenance team, maintenance tech, and all that. With a purely off-site model, and I had to interview a number to find somebody who wasn't just doing single family, who could handle and had other smaller multifamilies. But for example, it was an 8% fee. So the model's different. You think 3% versus 8%, but you don't have the labor and overhead burden of the on-site staff. So we ended up replacing that obviously with using contractors and vendors. But we were able to figure out early on in the underwriting that there was too much expense burden being allocated to this property.
A lot of people want to be profitable multifamily operators, but lack the knowledge, deal flow, experience, and capital to be successful. They often try to overcome these challenges out of order, slowing or eliminating their ability to get the next deal done. We have developed a framework that allows them to gain the knowledge they need to find profitable deals. When they use our system, they create time and location freedom, as well as the generational wealth they desire for their family. The Multifamily Kickstart program has proven to be the fastest way to establish credibility and build a profitable apartment portfolio. Hop over to jeromemyers.co to find out more. So, did that impact how much you could get from the bank and loan proceeds, or were they kind of okay with the situation overall?
And and again, this was my first deal. I didn't have experience, so it turns out I may have been able to gotten a waiver if I'd gotten an agency loan product. I didn't, and I went through some initial conversations, and that wasn't gonna fly at least that point. I could do that now, but I ended up settling in my back pocket because I had this other business for 24 years. I had a regional bank that I have a great relationship with. And it's like, well, that's kind of my back pocket solution. If this doesn't work out, I'll ring them up. I'm good because I know them on a first name basis. I ring them up. They're like, we don't do multifamily.
Surprise!
That's an asset class we don't touch.
We don't want any of that in our portfolio, sir. What are you talking about? You got some cash from your business? Yeah, bring that on. You want me to lean on some real estate? Nah, I don't think
that's not us. We'll do some other asset classes. We're not doing that. So I ended up through a referral, actually, which worked out well. I ended up getting a referral for a credit union that does a lot of commercial and multifamily business. And that loan rep knows the space. We went through a number of sessions going over my underwriting, my assumptions, to make sure he was comfortable with where I was coming from and what my projections were. And we're ultimately able to do that. And another plus, I mentioned this deal worked out extraordinarily well. So in 2019, the interest rate on that loan was 5.2%. About a year and a half into the deal, we refied at 3.1%. So that helped tremendously.
Whoa.
Some other things we did operationally was because I was looking at some other properties in the same market, and I was looking at the tax values on some of these other properties. They had more units and were more expensive. And I'm like, man, why am I getting sacked with such a high tax bill? So I ended up appealing the tax valuation. And it turned out the reasoning was because these were townhomes and they were individually parceled, they were being taxed as if they were individual single family units, not as a community. It had always been a community, it had always been operated as a community. So I was able to get about a 40% reduction in property taxes. That helped.
That's amazing. Like, because that's an expense. I mean, that money that you don't pay in taxes goes straight to NOI. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
How did you hire a consultant to appeal the tax?
I did.
Okay.
Again, I learned about him through referral. I knew I wanted to do it, and I started calling some relationships that I'd formed over the years and asked for advice, and I got a referral that worked out and then helped me do that.
Outstanding.
Yeah. So we reduced expenses, we replaced the property management team, we lowered the property tax burden, we refied got almost 2 points off, close to 2 points off on the interest rate. During COVID, this property, ironically, we cleaned up the tenant base, right? We did some things operationally. Now, also, admittedly, me, just like everyone else, during this era, we're the beneficiary of, compressed cap rates and what's going on in the market as far as sales prices and things like that. And we'd not intended to sell it, to be quite honest. I don't know if you want to go this part of the conversation, but after about 2 years, I started getting unsolicited calls from brokers asking. I'm sure the brokers have a tickler, right? Once this property's been owned for a certain amount of time, ring them up and let's see what they're interested in doing, what they're going to do, and all that. And I turned several away. and said, you know what, Reddy, we bought this as a long-term hold. It's operationally, it's doing great. We're going to sit on it. We're going to hold on to it. And so a broker that I'd not worked with or wasn't familiar with had called, and I said, well, send me your contact info because I want to keep in touch, right? You never know what's going to happen or may have other opportunities. Well, in addition to his contact info, smart for him, he also sent me an LOI that was much higher than what my back of the napkin, back of the envelope thinking was. And so it's like, well, maybe we need to rethink this. This might be an opportune time to consider letting it go. And so ultimately we did. And so we had it for 30 months and ended up with a 2.9 equity multiple on it in 30 months.
Whoa.
But to be honest, those first 6 months of HVAC issues and tenant issues that were griping about everything and wanting to be late and all that kind of stuff, that first 6 months, I was not sleeping the best at night sometimes. I was wondering, I even entertained the thought, if this trend keeps up and we can't right this ship, am I going to lose this property? Now, we didn't, obviously. And at about 8 months, things started to turn and they just went uphill from there. But it took a period of time to get things, what I'm calling, stabilized, right?
Yeah. When you don't know what you got when you take over a property, you find out in about first 90 days whether you bought what you thought you bought or you bought a project. And then it takes time, if you bought a project, to get the project situated so you can actually make some money. And I think a lot of people who come into the space think, oh, it's going to work from day one, like it's new out of the box. That's just not the case in a lot of the C-class properties that, we're doing these value add projects on. And it sounds like you did do some value add components there. Were you able to grow the rents too, or was it just a expense play?
Well, no, we were. And so this 37 unit, it was a B. It was solid B. It didn't have community amenities. They were nice units. Like I said, they're 2012 vintage. But we didn't have a pool. We didn't have fitness center, leasing office, that kind of stuff. We had a dog park area, and that was about it. But some things that we were able to do is, and this is entirely, I believe in my whole heart, attributable to the work that we did before the pandemic started coming and hitting us so hard. We were able to maintain 100%, with the exception of normal turns. We maintained 100% occupancy during COVID. We were able to maintain 100% collections. Now, we had about 3 people that got in the habit of paying late. So instead of paying by the 5th or 10th of the month, they would drag it out to the 20th or 25th. But by the end of the month, they were good. And we raised rates during COVID. So we were a little bit below market rate. And we were able to start increasing rates and stepping that up during COVID. So, we did increase rent as well, in addition to controlling expenses.
So the last question I always ask my guests is, what words of wisdom do you have for the listeners? Because you gave us a ton of jewels here. If you had to pick one thing for that person that's out there, what would you tell them?
And this kind of goes back to the comment you made right before I just made my last set of comments, which is, we've kind of gotten used to here lately in the last year, 18 months, 24 months of, we don't have to make concessions. We don't have to give people 30, 60 days of free rent, or give them gift cards or whatever. You pay for 13 months and we give you a month free. We've gotten used to this market being that I buy it and I can immediately start going up on rents, and I may or may not even have to do any value add. It's below market. I'm just going to start raising rents and I'm going to make all this money. So I think we are all probably going to be due for a reset at some point, whether that's year 2, 5, I don't know, but things will normalize at some point. They will. But the other thing is, and you clued in on this too, you don't really know what you got out of the gate. Just do your best job, follow your heart. I made the mistake of, and I think it was, maybe I just didn't want to impose on them, right? We're there with a group. I'm just going to look at a couple units per building. They got a day job. I'm keeping them away from their work.
Being courteous,
take care of
being
yourself.
courteous and respectful, man. I don't want to be invasive. I'm just this guy trying to buy property, and then you realize you got to deal with that on the backside. And so you got to protect yourself. That's what I tell people.
And you do. And go into it as if it's a business, right? You're buying a business in effect with each one of these properties that you acquire.
I love it. Mr. Edwards out of Charlotte, North Carolina, rounding, crossing home plate with the fat 2.9 equity multiple on a daily held for how many months? Because it wasn't 48. How many?
30 months.
30 months. 30 months, yeah. 2.9 multiple. The investors are lining up at the door for his syndication.
And they will not all be that way. But I got that one.
It's a beautiful one to have in a portfolio. So I didn't ask this, but I should have. How can the listeners get in contact with you?
Yeah, so my website is gdd.golfdogdoginvest.com or www.gddinvest.com. And there's a link there to contact me. My email is william.edwards@gddinvest.com.
Beautiful. To the listeners, the pack's with you. We'll talk soon. You made it to this juncture, so you really love what we shared on this episode of Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Do us a favor. Give us a 5-star rating. Give us a review. And share this with somebody who's interested in multifamily investing. Until the next time, the pack is with you.